We hear it all the time, everywhere on social media, how easy it is to change our life overnight. And yet, when you look at the numbers, research conducted in America shows that 43% of people give up on their New Year's resolution by the end of January, and 23% give up by the end of the first week. New Year's coming, and we don't want to fall into those statistics, do we? So today, I'll give you 5 habits that have worked for me over time. Nothing, and I mean nothing, can work overnight all at once. And it doesn't matter how many times you've been told that there's a miracle technique out there to do things fast, it's a lie. And trust me, I'm a very impatient person myself, so I have tried some of those miracle patterns. And no surprise, it didn't work. Why? Because it requires too much change and too much effort all at once. And we're just not wired for that. What I'm giving you today are tips that will initially not take you more than a few minutes, ideally per day, or every other day to start with. Whatever feels easier to you at first. Also, these tips that I'm giving don't need to be all implemented at once. In fact, they should not be all implemented at once if you're not doing any of them yet. Otherwise, you just give up. And it's very simple because it's only 1 or 2 habits to be implemented in each area of our lives, which are physical wellness, mental clarity and focus, and productivity and achievement. And trust me, if you're doing good in each of these areas, you're going to feel much happier. Okay, let's start with physical wellness. No surprise, it has to do with being active, but don't panic just yet. I'm not going to ask you to hit the gym and start working out on a daily, especially if it's not your thing. Remember what I told you? We need to implement tiny changes, not everything all at once. I want you to keep that in mind throughout the whole video, and I'm going to keep hammering it to you. We're talking about movement here. Studies have shown how sedentarity has an insanely bad effect on the human body and how it increases all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease mortality, cancer risks, as well as diabetes. Basically, everything that's terrible for us is enhanced by sedentarity. I recently learned that 31% of the global population aged over 15 years old engages in insufficient physical activity, and this contributes to the death of millions of people every year. And it can sound scary to many people that think they're not too much into sports or into intense activity, but it doesn't have to be, because actually just moving around does better for your health than just sitting around for 8 hours and doing a more intense activity only once in a while. We're simply not made to sit around all day. Recently, I was watching an online event, and there was someone in the chat that mentioned that they were watching that event walking on the treadmill. And I found that brilliant because it was so simple. And it doesn't have to be as expensive as a treadmill. I don't have a treadmill myself, but you can find some cheaper options online, even like a stepper, or even just walking in the neighborhood will do you tremendous good, maybe 10, 15 minutes here and there. Another option that's great to create movement is a standing desk, so you can alternate between a seated position and a standing position. Remember to not go all in straight away. If you're completely sedentary at this point, don't aim at walking 1 hour per day every day. It's probably too much difference compared to what you're doing now, and you're probably going to end up giving up. I'll give you a bonus tip at the end of this video on how to stick to your new habits, so make sure you stick around because it's a very useful tip. Well, it's been very useful for me at least. And while I'm at it, make sure that you show some support and love by liking the video and subscribe to my channel. Let's keep going. Okay, now moving on to the next area of our life, mental clarity and focus. A major habit to improve your mental well-being is to decrease your social media activity, at least a bit, and at least for some time. I hesitated to put this habit because I know it's all around, almost too much. We hear it all the time. Just stop social media, stop being on your social media, like it's the easiest thing to do. But the reason why I felt like adding it anyway is because I literally just deactivated my Instagram account a few days ago, and I feel so much better for it. And I know my account won't be deactivated indefinitely, but it's just to take a well-needed break from how overwhelming it can get. And since we're talking about how to make sure that we stick to our new habits, sometimes all it takes is to seize the opportunity when it shows up. Because if you listen to your gut feelings, if you listen to your entire body, and when everything in you just screams, enough, I need a change, just seize it. I was personally feeling a bit depressed lately from being too much on my social media, and I realized that it was indeed affecting my mental well-being, so I just shut it down. It's just so much overstimulation every hour of every day. I read an article recently that stated that Gen Z spends around 3 hours daily on their social media, and I think it's followed by Gen X that's not doing much better with over 2 hours a day. That's almost half a workday spent on our social media platforms every day. 3 hours. Imagine how much can be accomplished if we get those hours back. And the thing is, this race for entertainment is not new. In fact, it's quite ingrained in our brain as a species. There's a French philosopher called Blaise Pascal who I absolutely love, and he wrote this book in the 17th century called The Thoughts. And I could make a whole video about this book alone because there's so much that I took away from it. But basically, there's a couple of thoughts in this book that suggest already how terrible we are as human beings at not seeking constant entertainment. And one of them says, and I'm going to read it, "Nothing is so intolerable to man as being fully at rest, without a passion, without business, without entertainment, without care." We crave it all the time, and that was already an issue in the 17th century and probably way before, just in another form than social media, obviously. So how do we reduce our social media presence? Well, first of all, remember again, it doesn't have to be all at once. If you do not want to start with this tip, just leave it for later. Or if you want to focus on just one of your social media platforms, just do so. You don't need to shut it down entirely. And I think a good way to start doing that is just like for anything really. Just assess. Assess first how much time you do spend on these platforms. And in case you don't know how to do this, no judgment, I didn't know until recently, I'm going to walk you through the process. So basically, when you open your Instagram page, let's take that example, and you go on your own profile, there's a hamburger menu on the top right corner. Tap on it, and then if you scroll down a little bit, there's a time management section. So you can tap on that, and then usually it gives you an average time that you spend on your platform. So obviously, as you can see, I haven't spent much time on it because, like I said, I shut down my main Instagram account, and this one is a page that I don't use anymore. So it's basically close to zero all the time. But obviously the data will be different for you. Now, the second step, once you assess, is to put a time limit on the platform that you want to focus on, or on all the platforms if you want to focus on them all. So back to my walkthrough, when you are on the time management page again, you have this daily limit section that you can see is off for me. So you can tap on it and select whatever limit that you want to put for yourself. As always, don't be too strict with yourself to start with, and don't be too harsh on yourself if you don't reach your goal immediately. For example, if you do spend currently 2 hours on whatever platform, don't set your daily time to 15 minutes. That's just not going to work because it's unrealistic. Maybe start reducing your time by 15 minutes to start with, always step by step. Now, here's what you can replace the 15 minutes that you save from your social media use with. Just do nothing. Let me clarify. Remember that quote that I mentioned earlier from this French philosopher Blaise Pascal, that we don't know how to just stay at rest in a room? Well, that's a huge problem because it seems like we don't know anymore how to just be grounded and sit there listening to our thoughts or meditate. And that's precisely the third habit. Meditate and be mindful. I don't know about you, but I've noticed how my average attention span has decreased significantly over the years from needing constant entertainment and from consuming content that's faster and faster and in shorter and shorter formats, to the point that I've started to be annoyed at or bored with myself from sitting and listening to my thoughts or ideating, because it takes time and social media makes us think there's no time. So let's take our time back, shall we? You can just sit somewhere quiet with your thoughts or practice being focused on something that takes more than 30 seconds of your time. Maybe sit outdoors and just observe passerbys, or just nature if you're lucky enough to live in the countryside or nearby a park or something. See that again, we're not talking about something that's going to require insane habits changing. And especially once you start implementing my first tip of creating movement in your life, then you can just package the two. Walk in the neighborhood and then take the opportunity to sit on a bench and observe your surrounding for like 5 to 10 minutes. And bam, you got 2 tips wrapped up. Take time to feel the minutes pass. Life is short, so it's good to make it slow down a little bit sometimes. Saving time is also something that's going to help you tremendously in the third area of your life, which is productivity and achievement. And you can see why. So now that you save time, you want to be able to manage your time better. Again, this is not something that's going to happen overnight because it can be quite tricky to master managing your time better. But here's a couple of techniques that you can test out to see what works best for you. The first technique is called the Pomodoro technique, and you've probably heard of it before. It's a simple but very effective method I've tested it myself. That consists of alternating focus time of usually 25 minutes or so, followed by a 5-minute break. And it really helps maintain focus. However, if you're highly disorganized with your time, this is not something that I recommend for straight away, because you cannot pass from no technique at all to alternating 25 minutes focus, 5 minutes break throughout your whole workday. It's going to be a bit too much. So if it feels overwhelming, start with 1 or 2 Pomodoro sessions per day and see how it fits into your routine first. The second technique is a bit more beginner friendly, in my opinion, is to force yourself to set a limit to your work or achievement time. Let me explain. Let's say that you plan ending whatever you're working on by 7 p.m. You do that and make sure you set an alarm. I know it can be super frustrating if you're not finished by then, but that's why it's good and powerful. Because if you're annoyed at yourself for not having finished whatever you had planned to finish, then over time you'll get better and better organized to make sure that you fit whatever you had planned into your workday. Does that make sense? There are other techniques, of course, but let's stick to these 2 for now. That's enough to pick one and try it first. Let's not get overwhelmed here. The last habit that's going to change completely how you approach your goal is to break them down. Big goals are very intimidating, so instead of focusing on that, make sure that you zoom in and make it manageable steps instead. Neuroscientist Boloto, and I hope I pronounce it right, explains really well how our brain cannot skip the space between us and our goal. It's basically the same as us trying to cross a room. You cannot teleport across the room. You have to move through it step by step. And this is where the SMART goals come in. And I hope I get it right. It is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound goals.
Yeah.
It's basically a complicated acronym to just describe what I mentioned before, breaking down your big goals into manageable small steps. It's just going to help your brain visualize more clearly how to get from point A to point B and to keep it motivated throughout the whole process. So let's say that you want to start a business. Don't just say, I want to launch a new business, but instead make it a more manageable step and start with, for instance, I want to have my business plan written by the end of next month. That immediately makes it much less daunting, right? And as promised, I want to give you a little bonus tip to make sure that you actually stick to the new habits that you're creating. It's a very simple trick and it's worked like magic for me. It's called habit stacking. It's very simple. Basically, every time that you add a new habit, you create a new habit, just make sure that you tie it to an already existing habit that you have, if that makes sense. And that will make it much easier to incorporate that new habit into your existing routine without even thinking about it. Simple example, if you want to start journaling and you're a coffee drinker, just start doing the journaling process right after making your morning coffee. If you want to start stretching more, do it while listening to your favorite podcasts. I guarantee you that this will create consistency and discipline without you even realizing it or feeling overwhelmed. These simple habits are definitely worth trying, so make sure that you give it a shot and tell me in the comments how it went for you. Ciao!